Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get pre-orders of all the upcoming Force of Will sets, as well as releases of previous sets after they come out. TCGprime.com, with over 100,000 Force of Will singles, as well as out-of-print boxes from the past, and TCG accessories, as well as FowlLibrary.com, a wonderful resource for deck lists, article discussions, and more. Check them out at FowlLibrary.com, as well as these amazing patrons. Special thanks to guest lecturer member Vite Ramen. Thank you for your support. Class is in session. Hey there, rulers, DMO73 here, bringing you a feature match for the week, specifically a Wanderer match featuring the green utility Aimul as been requested. Before we get into it, I do want to say as a reminder that Game of Gods Reloaded is now currently available for pre-order in the link in the description from Odyssey Games. Right now it's just pre-release kits, but pre-orders for just pure boxes will be coming soon, so check that out to make sure that you are ready to go when the new set drops later in February. So yeah, we have Gareth Spencer on the left playing a blue, white, black Loki list versus Paul Reisman playing a green utility Aimul. It is using the fact that Aimul lets you untap a resonator during your opponent's turn to kind of really capitalize and generate some early game value with things like Sacred Elf, as well as things like Fei Li, which you'll see, as well as the fact that we have some really good ways to be able to flip Aimul frequently and then flip her back easily with the new Brad support to make a very interesting kind of utility deck. So with that, let's jump right in. Looks like Gareth is going to be on the draw, which is good for Loki, especially if he gets that turn 1 order, but we'll have to see where it goes from here. Paul double check to make sure that his life total thing works, but Paul, don't you know, we've got life totals on the street, so we're good to go, buddy. Seeing some interesting cards in the hand of Gareth there. I see a Brunhild. That's an interesting take. Also see the 2 birds for discard, which is pretty neat. We'll have to see exactly potentially how many old Wanderer cards a Loki list uses. Choosing to ship 2. And with that, we go into game 1, turn 1. Hitting that first turn 6 Sage Stone, not super ideal for Aimul because we can't Judgment this turn, but it does let us set up the Sacred Elf, which is nice. We'll be able to use this for 2 green will during Gareth's turn because of Aimul's ability. Not seeing a turn 1 drop order from Gareth. Does hit that Light Vapor Stone. Looks like we might just see a pass come down there. Bouncing a Sacred Elf doesn't feel super good, and Fenrir right now doesn't feel great either, especially since it can't be ordered, but it could definitely be used later. End of the turn, we're going to go ahead and see start to get those big show casts in. We're using this primarily in a big way to set up the Aimul flip a lot. You can grab, when Aimul flips over, you look at the top 3 cards of your deck, grab a card of non-chant card of total cost 3 or less, and you can put it into the field. And then like you can see here, Aimul can recover the Sacred Elf so we can cast Big Show again. Who needs Melfi? We just have Aimul and a Sacred Elf. Potentially might see an Aimul flip here based on what stone we get. Looks like we see floating white, call stone. Does hit the second 6 Sage Stone, so I think a flip here from the Aimul seems pretty likely. Oh no, just green for another Sacred Elf. I was wrong about what we floated. Down comes another Prisia, now up to 3 casts here. So we're already at a position where, because we have that Sacred Elf and an Aimul during his turn, we have the opportunity to cast Big Show with a potential protection from something like a Lowrite or a Wall of Wind, based on exactly how invested Gareth gets in the playline. Gareth eyeing that Loki. or my apologies, eyeing that Fenrir here to be able to put a body on board. Yeah, we are going to see an order here for the Fenrir. I like this a lot, even if there is a even if there is the possibility of a Lorite, this still puts us into play, gets us to be able to deal with at least one of these Sacred Elves, most likely, still get to call Stone, and now we're kind of threatening with this 10-12 J Ruler, which based on what Paul's running in the deck, he might not have a ton of great removal for it. We are going to go ahead and see a Lorite on the destruction effect from the Fenrir, so the neg 10 is going to go off, and that's fine, but we're going to see a Lorite come down here. Called Stone hitting a Heaven's Rift. Lorite's certainly going to be something that is a little bit of a frustration for Loki here, especially since it can turn off the ability of Loki to be able to kill his own J-Ruler. And what we see here is you see a Call of Darkness, and there's we're going to see the Aimul help us untap a Sacred Elf, which then we can use with the other will to cast Final Breeze, putting the Call of Darkness back in hand and effectively silencing Gareth for the turn because of that Torrent. He cast the Lorite, this is his second card, so it has that effect. Now it doesn't super matter here because of the fact that Gareth had already tapped out, but for later turns that could have been more necessary. So we are going to see just a snap Judgment here. It makes a lot of sense because we still have those two Sacred Elves to just go ahead and abandon the Stone Call here. Now we didn't get any real top deck manipulation off of a big show, so it'll be interesting to see what he grabs. Ultimately, we do kind of technically get to call Stone because he hits Magic Stone Research Institute. Not a bad hit here. And does hit the Gusting Skies, so now we're at 2 stones each. So these Sacred Elves suddenly have 500 attack, and the Lorite is a nice little 5/5. Does also set up Aimul to be a 7/7, which is not super huge, but she is imperishable, so we want to be killing her back and forth a little bit, but she also has access to Drain. Or we'll do something like this, where we can use that Absorbing Knowledge to use the Sacred Elf to kill and draw some cards off of the Aimul. Again, we still can't call Stone, but the Aimul also lets us untap the Sacred Elf during his turn, so we maintain the maximum amount of will possible to be able to respond to whatever Gareth is going to do. Do hit that second Light Vapors. Gonna attempt to try to attack into the Sacred Elf. Lorite's gonna block it. And then we're going to try to use Loki, and this is what I said. We're going to try to use Loki to pull up our own Fenrir, and then what we're going to do in response is recover the Sacred Elf with Aimul, use the Sacred Elf to then replay the Lorite to stop him. So this is a pretty rough spot for Gareth, being locked out of being able to kill his own J-Ruler, because Paul's never going to kill his J-Ruler if he can help it. Like, he's going to let him sit on that Fenrir until the end of time. Well, he just continues to amass a board. Down comes the Call of Darkness. And just as a reminder, in Loki, this search is for a villain and then a giant that does not have villains. You'll see Gareth start to go for a Schmel and a Hegel. You can't grab both of those. They both have villains. So you have to grab one or the other. Giants that Loki can grab that don't have villains would be the Underground Giant and the Addition. Those are the 3-drop that has to be targeted if you control, and is free if you control both. So those are the kind of options that you have. This is Paul kind of explaining that, making sure that we are grabbing the proper ones. Imagine we'll see potentially an Addition. Hegel certainly seems like a doable grab. There's a world where I think as Gareth, especially if you have a Loki enters the Game of Gods, there's this world where you cast a Loki enters on Paul's turn after recovery, specifically, to try to make him use stuff in advance, like tap out, and then force the Lorite out. Like, you got to play through the Lorites so that you can eventually start slamming these big old giants. It's especially true considering the fact that Paul's going to probably have multiple different stones coming up soon. And so then suddenly the neg 10 from Hegel doesn't feel nearly as good. And these little weenies that have been kind of sticking on board, Sacred Elf and Lorite and stuff like that, are suddenly actually swinging for a good amount of damage. See a Volmol come down here, just a regular Volmol. I don't hate this. I especially like the idea that this potentially sets us up to be able to remove the imperishable from Aimul. You know, especially in response to like trying to kill. We are going to see, looks like a cast of a Prisia. And the wonder is if we're going to grab, you know, what we're going to grab here is a 3-drop. My thought is because we have 6 Sage Stone, there's a world where we grab a Phaley. Phaley can kind of really turn on the utility of the deck, especially when you have a Prisia on board, right? Because then Phaley can clone the Prisia and grab you any Resonator you need out of the deck. So suddenly you pay 1 red, get any Resonator at instant speed, and you can do it twice per turn, essentially. Now that Resonator is going to go away at the end of the turn, but based on when you generate the token, it gets the value anyway. Or the token that Phaley creates anyway, not the Resonator you grab off of Prisia. We do see a Rachel come down here, which is going to manipulate some of the top decks of Gareth. I actually really like this play right now, even if we leave a couple cards on top, especially since he's already committed a Volmol this way. Controlling what Gareth is going to be able to draw makes Paul's kind of tempo control right now, or control of the game right now, really solidify. It puts him in a position where he knows what the options are going to be coming up, and he can really kind of find what likely is in Gareth's hand based on the kind of plays he commits to. Like the fact that he's committed to a Volmol already means that he's not going to be digging very deep. Means that we're not going to be ordering, means that there's other stuff that we want to be ordering. So this means that we want to continue to maintain this idea of not letting that Fenrir get killed. And Paul's already down to 3 cards. We've also seen enter effects resolve pretty consistently, so that also means that we're probably not looking at Loki's intimidate or Loki's deception. There's a lot of information pieces you can kind of gather from what the current board state is. And now, Paul does choose to go in for the kill on the Fenrir. Interesting. Don't know if I agree with this. I think I would have gone for the attack, just to be able to get in the 1300 damage because of the 3 buffs. And now if there is a Loki enters the Game of Gods and he doesn't have a response to it, he could get heggled, or we know there's a Schmel in the hand. Rachel's going to try to swing in. Says that's fine. And Lorite gets to come in for 700 damage, taking Gareth down to 33. We do see a Roar of the Underground Giant at the end of turn to try to get one of those Sacred Elves off the board. Does get bounced back. Now, what are we ordering here? Ordering. Okay, so this is a very interesting decision here. Ordering Hugin and Moonin. So this is going to force them both to discard all their hands as well as RFG every card. And then Hugin and Moonin will get bigger based on the highest total cost he has, which right now is only a 3, so it's not very big. I don't know if I agree with this playline. I think I might have gone for the ordered Brunhild. just so I had kind of a beefy flyer that could also potentially grab. It would be able to grab the. I think it was. I can't remember her name. The Hammer Lady, from in Rangrid, from In the Grave. So we're going to see, in response to the Hugin, we're going to let the RFG of the graveyard resolve, but before the discard resolves, we're going to use Sacred Elf, recover Sacred Elf to play Prisia, which is probably going to go get us a Lorite, I imagine. Yep, Lorite to stop the discard effect. So this is what I was a little bit concerned about. It's just this board has gotten very, very wide, and is going to be difficult for the Loki deck to really keep up with. You need something like Schmelz quickly to be able to prevent these kinds of boards from existing. And even as it stands right now, even if he did have a Schmel, 3 of the 6 things on his side of the field would stay alive. Calling Stone here hitting Ragnarok Stone feels especially bad, because this is a lethal represented board. End of the turn, we're going to see a Wings of Light and Darkness to get that Eternal Volmel off the board. Very good play here. Eternal doesn't care if you're removed from game. Leaves Gareth feeling pretty locked out at this point. Represented on board just from the Sacred Elves is 2100 damage. And then the Lumia represents another 800, so that's 2900. And then the 3 Prisias, or Rachel's and Prisias, each represent 1300 damage each. So there's just too much on board right now, and nothing for Gareth to interact with. That even though Paul's playing cards here, all he has to do is just swing for lethal with the board state. So that is going to do us for game 1 here. All that's left is to just watch the swings go in. And then we'll be moving on to game 2. And Gareth just checking what the attack totals of everything are to confirm whether or not he could just go ahead and concede. So moving into game 2 here. Looks like Gareth will probably be taking the draw again. I would think that in this matchup, you don't have a lot of order things to kill. Like your Loki is going to be pretty self-dedicated, just because you're not dealing with an order ruler, right? Which means you kind of need to start getting things comboed off early. You saw Paul's hand wasn't super full. He was committing a lot to board, and sure, he had a lot of potential flexibilities in terms of Aimul and stuff to dig, but his hand wasn't super great, so leaning pretty heavily on Schmelz to discard Paul's hand while also keeping his board clear could definitely put Gareth in a position to take over. The trick here is that he's got to get through Lorites to do it, and if we have too much of a setup, Paul could be in a really good spot to control those. Choosing to take the play, which I think is an interesting decision. Down we see a turn 1 Call of Darkness, so really just maybe not liking his hand post mulligan, or just trying to commit to the search now when he has the chance. Down comes the Schmel, and we're getting an underground giant as well. Giving Paul pretty free reign here on turn 2, or on turn 1. Ooh, choosing to search for a Rangrid instead of a Schmel. I can see the play line here. I still think Schmel would be a better option because Rangrid only has one enter effect to deal with, and that's the board clear, as opposed to Schmel, which has two effects to deal with, which is the discard and the board clear. So I think that that might do a little bit better. I do get the idea, though, of like Schmel's only good if you can pop your own J Ruler, and so we've seen that Paul did a really good job last game of keeping the J Ruler from being able to be killed, so leaning on a Rangrid early might be better, just so you can cast it earlier. So I can definitely see that. Unfortunately, though, these stones don't help that Rangrid situation. It's double Dark Depths. Not really much to be done there. Paul only having a Callstone pass with Gusting Skies. Almost certainly has a Big Show, though, to be able to make use of in the end phase. And like I said, there's the Big Show. Sixth stage coming down here. Having just done the Big Show, I wouldn't be surprised if we see an Aimul Judgment here. Oh, we're going to do one more Big Show just to be safe. And then, yeah, we're going to pop coin and see a Judgment. Clearly, very clearly, that thing on the top of his deck is something he wanted to grab. Put into play. Although, knowing Paul, apparently it's just going to be a Sacred Elf. Certainly not what I was anticipating a grab off the top. I would have thought something like Institute. And we see a Loki's Curse, double Loki's Curse at the end of Paul's turn. So this is a big turn potentially for Gareth. I mean, Gareth is at a position where he could very much permanently kill that Aimul if he had I mean, this would be a great turn for Rangrid if we had the Rangrid. The Rangrid will. There's also a world where you use Volmul. I mean, it taps you out, or if you're playing Thunder Parasol, there's some kind of blue removal. You remove Volmul, or order Volmul, call a stone, use Volmul immediately to turn off Aimul, or wait till Paul's turn before recovery so we can't recover the Sacred Elf, but use Volmul to remove all of Aimul's abilities and then permanently kill her, right? This is, I imagine that the Fenrir ordered is going to make them both 0, and I imagine the Sacred Elf is what's going to get killed here off of the Fenrir. So that ended up being a pretty good turn comeback here. We also have Ragnarok Stone on a turn where we are not super worried about the pressure that Paul's alleviating. Paul has to now spend his stones, right? He has to spend stones to try to get Aimul killed again. And 6-stage stone isn't going to recover it. So he's leaving himself up to have to try to do some setup here. Draw for turn. Seems like we have something before recovery. Paul's saying we're going to go ahead and, before you can actually kill my Aimul permanently, if just in case, let's go ahead and Spark of Life, kill the Fenrir, set up our Aimul to be able to recover that Sacred Elf. I like that play a lot. It still leaves Paul with 3 open will to be able to mess with during Gareth's turn. An ordered Rangrid here wouldn't feel super great. It's just going to hit one thing. An ordered Volmel I think would feel very good here. Looks like we're going to see the ordered... So this play is interesting to me. Another ordered Hugin and Moonin. I expect this is probably going to take a Lorite. Yep, for sure. It's certainly an avenue, right, for forcing the deck that doesn't have a lot of card draw seemingly to just like run out of cards very quickly. The problem is that like you paid 3 and you got stopped by a Lorite, which was pretty expectant, and unfortunately because you don't have the benefits of things getting right now anyway, you don't have anything set up that like makes the cost of Hugin and Mugen bigger. It's just a 4/4. So it can't really even put up much of a fight against what Paul's trying to do. There is a world here where during his main phase, or during Paul's turn, like after draw before recovery, especially if he commits this last green will to a big show, that if you had Schmel, like that would be the situation where I would go try to pop my own Hugin and Moonin, cast Loki Enters the Game of Gods, cast the Schmel, set up this, the discards. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we had that in the hand for Gareth. Seeing another Aimul Judgment here. We've seen those top cards with the Prisia, so we know at least potentially one of our options for what to grab. Looks like we're going to grab a Prisia, which turns into any 3-drop or less Resonator in the deck. Which, at this point in time, because we have a flipped Aimul, we have a Sacred Elf, we have 2 Green Will available, plus 6 Sage Stone. Yep, Phaley would be the thing that I would grab here too. This just really sets us up to be able to have maximum utility here, even if our hand gets disrupted. So the way Phaley works is you pay 1 red and tap her, and she puts a token copy of another target Resonator you control into the field. And at the next end of turn, the token goes away. The problem is, or the advantage of that is, it puts it into the field. It has an enter effect. So Phaley can essentially infinitely clone enter effects, as long as Phaley herself is protected. Seeing a Loki's Curse come down here at the end of turn to tap down the 6 Sacred Elf. Don't know if there's anything we're really doing against that. We are just going to go ahead and at least get another big show cast here, which sets us up for some more utility with Phaley, because now we can get 4 drops off of cloned Prisias. You were going to tap it down anyway. We might as well use the will. And then Gareth's going to get to recover here. The problem is, because we have the Phaley, we're at a point where we also have infinite Lorites. Well, technically infinite Lorites, because we can just clone Lorite in response to something, which feels really good. Like, we can leave that Hugin and Moonin alone for forever at this point. The fear of the Rangrid also significantly decreased with now that we have Phaley plus Lorite. Moving into combat, gonna swing in for 4. Paul says that's fine, I'll take it. Goes down to 36. We're gonna see an attempted destruction of our own Hugin Moonin, I think. And we don't even need to clone. We just have a Phaley, we just have a Lorite in hand to stop that. Now, there is something to be said about maybe during the very last end phase, portion of the end phase for Gareth, using Phaley to clone Prisia so we have another threat. to go into our turn and attack with. But I also don't know if I agree with that, because that would completely tap us out, which if Gareth, again, has Loki Enters the Game of Gods, a card that we've seen very little of in this match. If he's got one in hand, that's potentially really, really good for Gareth. Because if he taps himself out here, we could see an ordered Rangrid. Oh, yep, okay. Using Phaley to grab Prisia. Gets us a Prisia clone. And that gets us, what, a Rachel? So we can set up our own draws a little bit better. He's going to get us another Rachel. So this is really, really risky for Paul. Rankard will be a 7/7. So if Gareth has a single copy of Loki Enters the Game of Gods in hand, we're in for a world of hurt, because the play line here is before Paul even draws, we're gonna pop our own Hugin and Moon in. We're gonna order a Rangrid. It's gonna destroy your entire board while you're tapped out. And sure, you're gonna get to search for any card you want off of Rachel, but we just paid 2 will and wiped everything. Unfortunately, though, for Gareth, doesn't seem to have the out. Paul able to just move through recovery with this really, really well established board. Really wondering what's in the hand of Gareth here. You see Rachel swinging in at Hugin and Moonin. I like this play here because we've got Phaley to be able to answer anything he might be doing. It's not a trade, so I don't know why the Rachels die. Unless the bird has Bane, I can't remember. If it does, then he just gets to search for any card he wants. Keep in mind that Prisia token, he gets to swing with it this turn. So it gets to go in. And we're going to see so he does have the Loki Enters the Game of Gods. This is very strange to me. So this is a little bit of a misplay. We had an avenue where we could have used this Loki Enters to give dudes quick cast and order. Might just be a practice thing where he wasn't maybe quite familiar about how to use it. But we had an avenue where we could have used the Rangrid to just blow up literally the entire board. And it would have been a really big tempo swing. And here's the Rangrid here. So we're doing it now. So I'm just wondering, maybe it's just not knowing when you're allowed to do things, or just kind of practice for Gareth. Or maybe he just saw the line now. But I mean, this Rangrid, if that Rangrid had been able to resolve during Paul's upkeep, we would have killed 8 things. And then had the Rangrid on field. And then I don't know what's happening here. Oh, we swung in, we clones a Lorite token, but we're not putting it on field, and then we blocked the Prisia with the Rangrid to at least have those cleared. In comes the Lorite. Okay, we're gonna see a quick cast Volmul because all of his Resonators do have quick cast for the turn, so that can at least block the Lorite and kill that. Down comes Magic Stone Research Institute. I haven't even called stone yet this turn. Another Gusting Skies, still only getting a +4/+4. Aimul gets to swing here for 700 damage at this point, or 600, one of the two. and has that drain, so we get to gain some life back. And at that point in time, we're just going to pass the turn. Hitting another Dark Depths here. Into an ordered Hegel. I think that the play here, because of what's currently available on board, I think ordering Chance is a better option of the two if you're going to try to go for this. Ordering Chance feels very, very good, especially since we have the ability to still use Volmol to answer the... We can use Volmol to answer the Aimul. We can use... There's nothing really great for Fei Li to clone right now. Saying Chance also means that Aimul's probably not going to be able to flip back effectively. I think, though, we're going to see... I think he... If I remember correctly, though, Gareth calls Resonators here, which... You'd think, you know, if you've gotten the board clear, prevent them from playing Resonators is great. The problem is that leaves Hegel very vulnerable, and we already know that Paul's playing stuff like Spark of Life and has a J-Ruler currently active. So it leaves you open to Hegel just being immediately answered and then losing the lock completely. Like this, exactly like this. So Spark of Life's going to pop the Aimul, it gets to kill the Hegel, and now we just kind of lost that lockout piece. And Paul's free to pretty reestablish. Down comes Aprisia. I imagine at this board state we might see a little bit of a Prisia chain since we have Institute on field, like Prisia into Prisia, just to be able to close out the game, but we'll have to see if that's what Paul goes for here. Oh, we do see a Ray the Black Owl, but first we're going to get a second Prisia and then a Ray the Black Owl, which is great because next turn it's going to go to his turn, it's going to inverse into 0, and then you'll get to have this got a nice little barrier of protection, just in case there is any outs from Gareth. Paul throwing cards around. So now we have 0 out. She's an 8/9, and he's giving everything this kind of nice little bubble that has to be popped. So everything's pretty safe. I imagine there's a world where we even judgment the Aimul here, in all honesty, just to see about potentially hitting a second Institute to even pump up further. But yeah, this is gonna be a lot of damage. 6 Sage Stone, and we did hit a Black Silence, so now this Institute's providing +6. So in we go for 13. We see it enters the Game of Gods. Just to cycle and draw a card, I think. We block. 13 goes in that way, takes him down to 20. Seven goes in with the Lorite, down to 13, and then 0 for lethal here with 1400 damage. And with only 2 blue will, he does have 1 floating left. Seemingly not. Okay, so there you guys have it. That is the game. You can see a little bit about what the utility list is looking like. Deck profile for that will be up later this week. And again, be sure to check out the link for Odyssey to get your pre-orders in for Game of Gods Reloaded right now. And until next time, this is DMO73 saying, class dismissed.